It is 12:05, and we may get people coming in after we start, but because of time, we are going to get started. Thanks to all of you who are joining us today. We're also really excited to welcome International Writing Center administrators. According to our registry, it looked like there were people coming in from or calling in from Germany, as well as many from Toronto and also Dubai and other places. So we're really excited to have WCAs from outside the country joining us today as well. So our webinar title today is entitled Writing Center Administrator, or WCA, as Hero, A Scholar's Journey to Publication. And before we get started, I want to clarify how this webinar is set up. So as you guys all know, this is a live recording. We'll make a recording available we'll make today's webinar available through the WLN blog as soon as we can. Be sure to watch out for announcements on the WC listserv. The chat tool, I don't know. I mean, do you guys want to close it or do you want to keep it open? I feel like maybe we should close it only because then people might be confused where they're going to put the questions, right? Because we have a Q&A tool. So those of you who were, I guess right now, using the chat tool, I'm going to close it right now, just so that people don't get confused what they're going to be using to ask questions. So I'm going to do that right now. The chat tool is now closed. So if you do have questions, you can use the Q&A tool, which is on the bottom center of your screen. And again, you can do that at any time. You can ask questions as we're speaking. And then, is it Elizabeth? You are going to be reading the questions and we'll answer all of them
right
at the end of our presentation. Finally, we have a bibliography of our sources, and they will be available on our final slide of our presentation, and you will have access to that as well through the video. So just to introduce ourselves, my name is Sohui Lee. I'm the Assistant Director, Assistant Professor and Faculty Director of the Writing and Multiliteracy Center at California State University, Channel Islands.
I'm Julie Prebel, and I'm Associate Professor of Writing and Rhetoric and the Writing Program Director and Writing Center Director at Occidental College in Los Angeles.
And I'm Elizabeth Kleinfeld. I direct the Writing Center at Metropolitan State University of Denver, and I'm also a full professor of English.
Great. So I'm going to get started. I will be sharing my screen today and opening up the slideshow, and I'll be running my slides, and then I'm going to transition to Julie, who's going to then open up her slideshow. So excuse us as we have a few little technical things that are going on right now. Let me just try to do a slide share here. Okay, so you should now see the title of our presentation here, WCA's Hero, Scholar's Journey to Publication. So I want to begin with WLN, who's sponsoring this webinar. It's the Journal of Writing Center Scholarship. Then it was known for a while now as Writing Lab Newsletter. It was first published in 1977, and I think I can safely say it is the oldest periodical that we have in our area that's just dedicated to writing center work. And since its publication, Writing Center work has been recognized not only as a practice, but also as a scholarly and research discipline. Our field now includes multiple peer-reviewed international and national journals dedicated to writing and multiliteracy centers. Despite the availability of these journals, ranging in research rigor and types of articles published, many Writing Center practitioners have identified barriers to moving manuscript to publication. Some common barriers that they've identified in a recent survey that we conducted include the following. First, the lack of time as resource, writing and framing scholarly research, communicating the relevance of a project, program, or theory, and then just finally, the lack of reading or writing groups that they have access to. So one way we can think about overcoming these obstacles might be in thinking about these barriers as part of a process or even a narrative in our struggle to publish. Approaching our barriers as a narrative process has two advantages. One advantage is knowing that it is a story that's familiar to everyone and you're not alone. But the second advantage is that the narrative process has anticipated stages. It has a beginning, middle, and end, and there are concrete strategies that many others have used to maneuver around these barriers. So one of the most popular narrative processes, oops, I'm sorry, just jumped ahead here. So one of the most popular narrative process or pattern demonstrating how heroes overcome obstacles is the classic hero's journey. I even found it here, spoofed in the 2008 August issue of the New Yorker. So this narrative pattern is memorable and compelling because it has 6 key stages that's relevant for our talk today. But rather than hero's journey, we'll be calling this narrative scholar's journey to publication. Again, I keep skipping ahead, so I apologize for that. Scholar's journey to publication. And this is a journey in which the scholar travels into the unknown, the research topic, and may result in many trials and challenges that ultimately reaps the reward of publication. So the narrative stages of the scholar's journey, particularly the middle 4, which is the meeting the mentor, crossing the threshold, path of trials, and turning point, are useful analogies for discussing themes such as the literature review, time management, and writing support groups. So in today's webinar, I'm going to be talking about the literature review as process. Then my colleague Julie Prebel will be discussing time management. And finally, Elizabeth Kleinfeld will discuss writing groups and how to form them. So I'm going to begin this section on literature review as process. I want to briefly define the literature review, which many of you probably already know, and then offer a way to think of the literature review as a process in the scholar's journey. According to WLN editors, and just anecdotally from my own experience as a reviewer, the literature review section poses a major challenge with many first-time writers. And one of the main reasons why I think many manuscripts are declined. So what is a literature review? A literature review is conducted by scholars in almost all academic fields. It provides a review of prior relevant research that's related to a particular topic. People do it in order to develop new theories about a particular topic area or explore new areas of research. And they also do it to build on existing ideas and approaches. So according to Paul Tasso, reviewing the literature requires the ability to juggle multiple tasks, from finding and evaluating relevant material, to synthesizing information for a variety of sources, from critical thinking to paraphrasing, evaluating, and citation skills. So today, I won't be going into the nitty-gritty details on strategies of how to juggle all these multiple tasks. Rather, I'll be looking at the bigger picture of the literature review, the stages of the literature review, and its general objectives. An understanding of the literature review's role in academic writing may help writers use literature to guide research and to tell the story of a research topic in the most compelling way. So high quality literature review, according to Webster and Watson, have the following characteristics. It presents focused review with a strong purpose. It presents comprehensive literature within its scope, that is depth, and also it covers relevant literature. It is selective and representative. Literature review is an important part of a scholar's process to publishing. For me, it was helpful to think of literature in different stages because of the distinct ways these parts help the scholar reach their goals. So for me, there were 3 key stages for covering the literature review. The first is meeting the mentor, using the mini literature review as mentor, crossing the threshold, strategic reading of literature, and finally, path of trials, writing the literature review. The mini literature review is the first initial survey of literature in an area of research. It's usually done prior to studies being conducted or data being collected. It is not intended to be a comprehensive literature review. This comes next. Rather, it provides a quick picture or survey of emerging or existing theoretical or practical models. So thinking of it as a mentor, the mini literature review can direct the scholar to research areas that might need the most attention. For instance, to try out emergent practices or theories, identify gaps in practices or theories, or get inspiration for new direction. These directions, though, will likely change and become more nuanced when the scholar works on the next phase, and that's the strategic deep reading of literature. So having then determined to write on a specific topic or area of focus, the scholar author would tackle a strategic reading of literature. This is the deliberate plan of reviewing literature that will help you assess past critiques and problems, research context, and/or methodology. So there are 2 different strategies that you might want to consider, depending on whether you have a mature literature topic or a newer literature topic. The mature topic means that the accumulated body of literature in the topic area is vast and plentiful. This also means that there's much more literature than one could include in a readable focused literature review. The solution to this first problem is to narrow the review by strategically limiting the research scope. You might consider sharpening the focus of your research topic to institutional types or demographics, targeting a specific time frame of study, or even focusing on the discourse in specific journals. The second problem in mature literature topics is that there are often multiple branches of theories and practices within the area. To be comprehensive, it is important to identify these major branches, even if you choose to focus on a single branch. One way to solve this problem of branches is to identify landmark essays in the area. Often scholars of landmark essays identify the branches in their own literature review, and they provide a bibliography of sources that the scholar can trace and read. Landmark pieces usually are cited by multiple authors who are also writing on the topic. The strategy for conducting a strategic reading of newer literature is different from the mature literature topic, primarily because the accumulated body of literature in this topic area is scarce. So literature is few, and the net for literature needs to be wider. One way to address this problem is to widen that scope, and you might consider broadening the focus of the research, widening the time frame of the study, or even widening the coverage of the topic in a broad range of journals and publications, maybe even outside the discipline. So for instance, scholars covering newer literature topic might review composition journals or interdisciplinary journals where topic may be more developed. So I have an example of this, and it's my own. Let me move on to that one. And this is dissertation boot camps, which I published in WLN in 2013. So when I first researched this topic, it was a few years before that, I found that there were no articles published in Writing Center journals or WLN, but I was able to draw upon articles in related topics such as writing, faculty writing retreats or graduate writers. I also cited relevant literature outside Writing Center journals, such as Chronicle of Higher Education, College English, and the Journal of Further and Higher Education. So in the next stage, which is writing the literature review, the scholar might include the following information. A high quality literature review usually provides clear explanation of objectives of the literature review, defining the purpose of the research problem, Moreover, a high-quality literature review is transparent with its own search and procedure. It explains why literature selected, explains why literature selected define an appropriate boundary or scope for the chosen topic and level of analysis. For instance, if your literature is narrowed to a topic in specific contexts, this is identified and explained. Secondly, high quality literature review usually identifies the categories of problems, theories, practices, or methodologies in the literature. This overview of categories should be written after the survey of literature is completed. In addition, literature review identifies and critically appraises patterns that the scholar sees arising from the survey of literature. What are the gaps, the trends, the clusters, the developing approaches, etc. The literature review addresses these questions. How does each work highlighted in the literature review vary from the work of others? And how is it situated within the survey of literature as a whole? So sorry about that. I think the reason why I'm having these jumps in the slides is that the screen is frozen a little bit. All right. Finally, this last part is assessment. The high quality literature review usually offers conclusions or assessments explaining what arguments, theories, studies are the most compelling and contribute significantly to the research topic being covered in the literature review. So that really kind of concludes this section of the webinar. I looked at literature review as a process, and I've discussed what it is, its characteristics, and also its stages. I'll be turning you over now to Julie Prebel, who will be discussing time management. So let me stop the share here.
Thanks.
And I think Julie should take over.
I just want to say, sorry everybody about the informality here, but I had a little trouble seeing your share screen, Sohui.
Oh, you did?
I did,
Okay.
but
okay.
So hopefully mine will work. Let's cross our fingers. So far not working well. Okay.
All right.
Hold on, everyone.
Out of curiosity, Elizabeth, did you see the screen too, or no?
Yeah, I had no trouble with it.
Okay. All right.
Hold on. I'm seeing Elizabeth. Can't see my own screen. Okay, let's see what happens here. Can you see my screen, Elizabeth?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll keep going. So hopefully hope for the best here. So we need time to do things like write literature reviews and other aspects of our work. So this segment of our webinar kind of takes a step in a different direction. The next two segments will ideally provide some hands-on strategic ways that we can enhance our productivity as scholars. So this section of the webinar focuses on a common obstacle in our scholars' journey, which is time management. And one of the aims of this portion of the webinar is to provide you with some ways to enhance your research and writing time. So there's considerable literature, some of which we cite on our last slide, as Sohui mentioned earlier, on time management and ways to enhance our research and writing productivity. In the literature, there are three main takeaways that I'm going to emphasize here. It's important to set goals, to set priorities, and to monitor our progress. And I'll go into more detail on all three of these areas in the slides that follow, and Elizabeth will also loop back to these priorities in her part of the workshop. So this slide outlines some of the more common or what we thought were relatable demands on our time.
Actually, Julie, I'm going to interrupt you. I don't know if others are, I'm just seeing your first slide, but I'm not seeing anything beyond that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Sohui, what are you seeing?
So it doesn't look like you're playing it. It looks like you just had it on Google Doc.
Do you see it now moving?
No.
Mm-mm.
Strange. Okay, I'm going to stop share. And hold on. I'm going to get out of this. Sorry, everybody. I don't know what's going on today. I'm going to go back in to share. Sorry, I'm going to start over. I can't find my screen share, so this is a bit of a problem. Well, I don't know what to do. It won't.
You can't find the screen share for you?
Did
Slideshow for me. I'm sorry. One of you could do it, and I can just tell you when to move.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not letting me screen share.
Okay.
It's just every time I hit it, it says.
Oh, hold on, let me get into your slides. Unless Sohui, do you have them handy?
I did not have them right here.
Or Julie, did you say you downloaded them to PowerPoint?
And that's what I was using.
Oh, okay.
And so, and now it won't let me, if I hit share, it just won't let me share. It says, it just says, yeah.
Do either of you have jokes to tell while we're waiting for me to find this?
I can try again, but I think it's just really not happy.
I can look for it too if you want.
I see Elizabeth, I see,
Okay, Julie, I've got your slides up. Let me go to slide sharing on my side.
okay. Thanks, everybody. Hopefully we're not losing people because of this. Okay, so Elizabeth, I'm on, just show slide 2 quickly. Start at slide 2 if you want. Just, I already covered that. And then on to, this is the slide that I'm on. So everybody can see that now?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, so this slide outlines some of the more common, or what, as I said, what we thought were relatable demands of time, or the obstacles that can undermine our scholarly productivity. And certainly this list is not all comprehensive, and there's many more specific and sort of local obstacles that you might face. But you might consider whether some of these seem relevant to you as we move on. So the first of these that I want to just call out from this slide, and that I've bolded in the green there, has to do with course prep time. And interestingly, the general view in the literature on this topic is that we are over prepping our courses, and we're trying to spend more time to minimize unstructured class time, and we feel, some of us feel uncomfortable with that unstructured class time. There was an article in the July version of the Chronicle of Higher Ed that focused precisely on this issue. And in that article, the author offered ways to restructure class activities to reallocate time for our prep so that we can do other things during that time and give more student involvement in class time. Another point that I wanted to pull out here is just the idea of ideas for projects, rather. So what if you're working on a project you initially believe is important and interesting, but find that you're not making any progress on it? So typically, working on a project that is of little interest to us, perhaps unsurprisingly, can lead us to procrastination and will slow our progress. So it's good to be attentive to when we might need to abandon a certain project because it's not working for us and move on to something else. And then finally, the other part that I wanted just to highlight briefly is that studies show that we often underestimate the time that it will take to accomplish research, writing, revision, and other scholarly tasks. So when devising your research plan and schedule, which I'll talk a little bit about in the slides that follow, be as realistic as possible and work buffer time into your plan to account for unforeseen obstacles that you might encounter. Okay. So a focus on writing environment and writing habits are what Boyce calls stimulus control procedures, which are important to address before trying to overcome the obstacles listed on the previous slide. So make sure that you set up a writing environment that is most conducive for your goals. Making sure this space discourages distractions and interruptions is key. Secondly, set up writing habits that will best allow you to accomplish your tasks. And more effective writing habits include making sure that you write regularly, that you avoid binge sessions where you try to get a bulk of your work done at once. Those usually aren't very effective. And not waiting for inspiration to strike necessarily, but finding inspiration in your everyday work. Next. Boyce's priority principle emphasizes the need to prioritize writing by delaying other tasks to do the writing first, and developing a contingency to not writing, giving up something else if the writing is not done. These other contingent tasks might be calls or emails that are not urgent, checking social media, house or work tasks that can wait until after your writing time is completed, and so on. Sylvia talks about how some of these tasks can often create specious barriers to getting writing done. These are the obstacles to overcome in our scholar's journey. We tend to think about time management and our writing time as finding time to write, which Sylvia thinks is destructive thinking. And he encourages a shift in our terminology and our thinking to allot time to write, to giving writing priority. Rockmore and Laszloffy also emphasize the importance of developing a regular writing routine, whatever your academic position, department, field, or institution. And they recognize that it might seem difficult to place research and writing at the center of your daily activities, and they focus especially on the obstacles to writing faced by Black academics and other academics of color. They remind us of the low priority obstacles we might all need to overcome, such as service demands, student mentoring, and heavy teaching loads. And one approach they suggest is to include planning a Sunday meeting with yourself. And as you block out times on your calendar for the week, as you might do for your work tasks, put writing and research into one of these designated blocks and mark yourself as busy so nobody can schedule over that. In general, the rule of thumb with all of these approaches is that it's important to block out time in your schedule for professional scholarly work, and you need to make that time non-negotiable. Next. All plans begin with a project idea, of course. And so one way to think about developing project ideas, if you feel that you're stuck in some way, is to cultivate some alertness and pay attention to where you might draw ideas for your research. Plan time in the schedule simply for thinking about ideas that you might want to work on. And mine your own writing center as a resource for some of these ideas. Have there been changes in the Writing Center that seem to have resulted in something new that you think might be useful to talk about? Has the usage of your Writing Center changed for some reason, and what accounts for that change? Have roles in the Writing Center changed? Have you reduced staffing? These are all topics that we probably encounter in a practical way every day that could become research ideas. Next, you should plan your research writing time to finish specific manageable units in each of those sessions of writing, such as writing an outline, completing notes on a few readings or chapters that you'll be using in your research, writing part of the literature review that Sohui went over in detail, writing part of an introduction, a specific section, etc. And in setting your goals or your discrete tasks, make sure that they are SMART. And Elizabeth will return to some definitions of SMART as well. But typically, SMART refers to goals that are linked to a specific task with success that can be measured, that are aligned with the project. They have to be reasonable and realistic, and they should have a targeted deadline in order to be effective. Moreover, you should plan beyond your daily goals. If you have imposed deadlines for a revision that's due, a conference paper, an abstract, etc., work backwards from those deadlines and create your overall master plan for the project. If you don't have any external deadlines, it's vital that you set some deadlines for yourself. So self-imposed deadlines will help us say no when asked to take on additional work that will distract us from the scholarship professional achievement that we're trying to accomplish. Many scholars find it helpful to create longer-term scholarship plans, and many institutions require this for renewing contracts, tenure and promotion, when requesting funding and grants, and that sort of thing. So consider taking time to create 1-, 3-, and 5-year plans and build in your discrete tasks for that work into those plans. And then finally on this slide, just as we tell our students, remember that writing scholarship occurs in steps. Discovering, organizing, writing, and revision and editing, and don't be tempted to skip those steps as you're moving through your process. Okay, next. So one technique that we just wanted to call out here that some of us have found really effective is the Pomodoro Technique, and you might be familiar with this one. So many writing coaches recommend using a timer for your daily writing practice. And the Pomodoro Technique is one such concept. You can set a timer on your phone in 25-minute increments to concentrate on a particular writing activity without any interruption during that time. So many researchers have found that the ideal work or writing time is 25 to 30 minutes, followed by a short break. And this technique is widely known to help eliminate distractions and make the best use of time. Next. The first step in the Pomodoro method, as I use it in academic writing, is to break your writing project down into activities that can be completed, in 5 Pomodoros or 2.5 hours. Writing an entire journal article is unlikely in this time frame, but a to-do list of shorter tasks can work well. For example, you could write a section of the literature review, which Sohui discussed. You could write those detailed notes on the sources that include quotes and other evidence that you're using. You could write your introduction. And these shorter tasks are shown to be able, that we can accomplish these within 2 hours. And to make sure that you can write without interruption, it might be helpful to close all web browsers, email screens, etc. And usually I do that, and then in my 5-minute break is when I reopen them and reply to emails that I feel like I need to do at that moment. And if a 2.5 Pomodoro cycle seems too long, given the time constraints in a particular day, even starting to write without interruption for just 25 minutes a day is a great way to make writing a priority. And then when you're able to, you can build in more Pomodoros into your cycle. Okay, next. And then finally, it's important to monitor your progress and your process too, and to reflect on that process. So Sylvia says that any action that is instrumental in completing a writing project counts as writing. So remember that writing occurs in steps, as I noted earlier, and take time to document where you are in that process. Document how much time, how much research and writing work you actually do. And whether you do that with pencil and paper, or you create a spreadsheet. I actually have an Excel spreadsheet, and I document all of where I'm at with all of my projects. And there's some online software that you can use also to help you chart that progress. But chart your progress by the time you spend writing, or the total number of pages written, articles read, research conducted, and so on. So research finds that self-monitoring and acknowledging success improves our satisfaction and motivation and helps maintain an even and active research program. You might think about whether your goals are unrealistic. Are you really using all available time for research? Are you scheduling your research time during a block that does not work for some reason? What might be holding you back? Are you missing a relevant skill or technique? Are you encountering some sort of psychological roadblocks? Such as perfectionism or feelings of disempowerment about your writing. These are places that might stop us in our tracks as we're moving forward, and they're important to reflect on and try to move ahead with. So try to establish concrete solutions for any of these problems identified. And some of these solutions might mean decreasing your research time by 10% to allow for more writing time, making a list of tasks that can be accomplished in 5, 10, or 15 minutes and carrying that list with you. And when you have those shorter blocks, try to do those tasks. Set up some research writing dates with an accountability partner or group, and Elizabeth's going to talk about that in just a minute in much more detail. And then finally, my last slide is just a summary of what I tried to present here, just to sum up. So you'll get through this path of trials, in this case, managing your time to achieve your scholarly goals by remembering these key strategies: setting goals and priorities, identifying obstacles, allotting time versus finding time, being realistic and taming your inner critic, and then monitoring your progress. All right, thanks everyone.
Okay, so now we will move into my slides. And hopefully I will not have any technical difficulties. Okay, so I'm going to talk about writing groups and how to start one. And after hearing everything that Sohui and Julie said, you might be feeling kind of overwhelmed and like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do all this? And the point of thinking explicitly about writing groups at this point is to remind you that you don't have to do it all alone, that there are lots of other people out there who can support you in different ways. And so we want to emphasize, going back to the scholar's journey concept that Sohui introduced, that having mentors and having helpers along the way is actually part of the journey. So Julie talked about the 3 vital practices of setting goals, setting priorities, and monitoring progress. Writing groups can help with all of these, providing external support and accountability. Julie also mentioned SMART goals, and if you're not used to setting goals that are specific, measurable, aligned with a particular project, realistic and time sensitive, you might find yourself setting abstract goals that aren't very helpful, like work on the article or something like that. I'll talk later about accountability groups, which is a type of writing group that can be specifically focused on helping members smarten up their goals. When it comes to setting priorities, a writing group can be helpful because having regular contact with others who are facing similar struggles can help you troubleshoot and also stand strong. So like we're all bombarded all the time with these so-called opportunities for service, and it's a lot easier to say no to them when you've got a group of people who can normalize saying no for you and say, yeah, you should say no to that. That is not going to move you forward in your career or help you meet your goals. And then finally, writing groups can help with monitoring progress by providing deadlines and feedback to drafts. So writing groups can be really helpful with the ordeal and turning point aspects of the scholar's journey. Julie mentioned a daunting list of obstacles that we face, like heavy teaching loads and anxieties about perfectionism and underestimating how long research and writing tasks will take. Writing groups can be really helpful to cheer you on when you're dealing with an especially challenging time, or commiserate with you and remind you that you're not alone. They can help you stand strong when you're saying no to things that there's a lot of pressure on you to say yes to. And it can also be really helpful to just have a neutral group of people to help you make sense of confusing or contradictory reviewer comments. So, you know, when you get reviews back, reviewer 2 never quite agrees with everything that reviewer 1 said, and you're like, well, what am I supposed to do? Well, your writing group can often help you make sense of those types of things. So what I'm showing you here is the 3 main types of writing groups and the specific functions that they serve. Lots of writing groups will do 2 or 3 of these things, and so I'm not suggesting that these are like hard and fast categories. I'm just kind of categorizing the writing group so that I can talk about those 3 different functions in an orderly way. So I'm going to first talk about the Write on Site or Shut Up and Write group. I like to call it, because I love dogs, the sit and stay group. The primary goal of this type of group is to provide space and time for actual writing. So participants show up to the meeting with their laptops or notebooks, and they're actually writing during the time together. These groups usually meet for a bare minimum of an hour, and I've heard of groups that last all day long. So, you know, this is something that can be negotiated by group members. Some groups, if they meet for a long time, will do a brief progress check-in at the beginning, middle, and end, or something like that to help keep people on track. But these groups, no matter how they meet or how long they meet, they function on the premise that being surrounded by other people tapping away at their keyboards can be inspiring. The next type of group is the draft exchange group. This is the traditional writing group in which members share drafts of their work with each other and offer feedback. Groups can decide to circulate drafts ahead of time or to spend part of their meeting time actually reading drafts before discussing them. Exchange groups are typically made up of several people from the same discipline, so they can offer each other substantive feedback on ideas and development. But Tara Gray, who's the author of Publish and Flourish, Become a Prolific Scholar, suggests that it can actually be really useful to share early drafts with non-experts, that is, people from other disciplines. And I wanted to highlight this because most Writing Center people are the only Writing Center people on their campuses, so it might be really hard if you're looking for a local face-to-face group. It might be really hard to find other people who are actually in your same discipline. So Gray's thoughts on working with people from other disciplines, I think, could be really useful for us. So she argues that one reason folks from different disciplines give good feedback is that they don't worry about seeming unfamiliar with your topic. So they'll ask the questions that a person who is an expert in your discipline might be too embarrassed to ask, or they'll admit that a term that you're using is unfamiliar to them or something like that. So Gray calls the non-expert writing group a writing circle. And in her book, she describes a few different ways to make the writing circle work. Here's what she suggests for a group in which each member brings 3 pages of a draft to each meeting. The group spends part of their meeting time reading the drafts and identifying the key sentences, and then discussing what the resulting after-the-fact outline suggests about that section of the draft. An after-the-fact outline that seems jumbled, for example, would indicate that points are not discussed in an order that makes the most sense. And then the other model that I want to highlight that Gray talks about that is for non-experts involves participants bringing an entire article or chapter manuscript. They would spend meeting time reading and discussing just 1 or 2 drafts. Because the readers are non-experts, the writer provides readers with the writer's worksheet, which you can see on the screen, that will provide readers with information about context, purpose, audience, format constraints, and specialized terms, and then ask some open-ended questions about the draft, such as what order do you suggest I present my points in? After reading the draft, discussion takes place in several rounds, and Gray specifies that the first round is where everyone goes around and offers some praise for an aspect of the draft. The second round, readers respond to the specific questions that the writer asked. In the third round, readers respond to or offer any feedback that they think will be particularly helpful. And then the fourth round is, she calls it the motivational round, and it might sound kind of cheesy, but the idea is that it's where you remind the writer that they can do it, that even though maybe they have a lot of revision to do, it actually only falls into 2 or 3 different categories, or although there was a lot of feedback given, there's a lot of overlap, or that kind of thing. So it's really where the cheering takes place. The last type of writing group that I want to describe is the accountability group. This is the group that can focus on helping members articulate their SMART goals and provide a mechanism for being accountable to those goals. When members meet, either in person or remotely, they share their SMART goals for the week and talk about whether they met last week's goals and why or why not. So generally these groups would meet weekly, but meetings could be really short because you're not sharing or responding to drafts, you're just sharing your goals and troubleshooting those goals. Members help each other fine-tune and smarten up their goals. They question each other about how realistic their goals are, and they help members identify obstacles that are keeping them from meeting their goals. So for example, someone who regularly does not meet their goal of writing for 30 minutes every morning might be prompted by their group to consider restructuring their morning routine to better facilitate writing actually happening. And Robert Boyce's 1990 research, which Julie already mentioned, found that academics who wrote for 30 minutes a day over the course of a year and kept a log when they wrote produced 4 times more publishable writing than those who binge wrote. Authors who did those things and also had an accountability mechanism like an accountability group, they produced 9 times more publishable writing than those who binge wrote. So if you're thinking to yourself right now, well, binge writing is what fits in my schedule, I think that Boyce's findings are really compelling for trying it, you know, experimenting with daily writing, with keeping a log, and with an accountability group. And the other thing I'm showing you on the slide here is a screenshot from a website called 750 Words, which is basically the accountability group concept made available to anyone who has an internet connection. So instead of putting together an accountability group on your own, you could just log on to this website and create an account. So many campuses host 1 or more of these types of groups, often through the Center for Faculty Development or Center for Teaching and Learning. If your campus doesn't offer writing groups or you're unaffiliated with an institution, you can form your own groups on campus, or you can connect with grad school colleagues to form a remote group. And I'm hearing all the time about remote groups and how useful they are. A lot of remote groups use Zoom or Skype, things like that, but they function just exactly like a face-to-face group. Finally, many professional organizations either host or facilitate formation of writing groups, such as RSA and the Digital Blacklit and Composition Group, which hosts virtual writing groups. So if you're going to create your own writing group, here are some suggestions to maximize your chances of success. The first and possibly most important thing is to have really clear, concrete expectations that are shared among all members and due dates that all participants are clear on. It can be helpful, for example, to write up the expectations and due dates in a Google Doc that all members can have access to. It's really helpful, especially if you're meeting in person, to allow for some check-in time at the beginning of each meeting where people will catch up and say hello, especially if it's a group that only meets once a month. Because if you don't plan for that time, you're just going to get really irritated when those check-ins happen. They will happen, and they will take up the first few minutes of the time. So just plan for them, and then you don't have to waste energy being irritated by them. Then consider rewards for folks who meet their goals or some kind of penalty for folks who don't. One of my favorite stories about a group that had a penalty is a group that was formed with the help of the RSA, and this group had been together for years and no one had ever missed a deadline because they had all made a pact that was in writing that said if anyone ever missed a deadline for sharing a draft with the rest of the group, they would have to make a $100 donation to a political organization they despised. And no one ever wanted to do that. So they were so good at meeting their deadlines. Finally, I've shared here a link for a starter kit for writing groups that Sohui helped put together a few years ago that has, it mentions some of the things I've already mentioned, but has a lot of other helpful tips. So in closing, we want you to think of yourself as the hero or heroine of your scholar's journey, and don't be shy about enlisting the help of mentors and helpers as you navigate crossing the threshold, the path of trials, and the turning point. There's no reason to do it alone. And remember, there actually is reward at the end. You get all the fame and luxury of being a published scholar. So, okay, on our next slide, here's our bibliography, and then you'll be getting a link after we're done to a satisfaction survey, and then we'll also, I think in that email, we're planning to have a link to wherever on the WLN website the slides and the recording will be. I'm not sure if we'll have that together quite fast enough to send it with the satisfaction survey, so you might end up getting 2 emails, but rest assured that the 2 emails or the 1 long email will be sent to you. And then if you would, please take the satisfaction survey. It will help us make sure that the next webinar is touching on topics that are important to you in your development as a scholar and someone who wants to publish. So at this point, we are happy to take questions, and we're going to use the Q&A tool, which, as Sohui said, is at the bottom of your screen. So let me stop sharing. And if you have a question, just go to the Q&A and type it in, and then I will read them out, and whoever can best answer it will answer it.
I'm also thinking, I don't know how you guys think about this too, but we only have 23 people. Do you prefer having it written out, or do you want a conversation?
Oh, just to unmute everyone?
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't tried doing that, but
that's fine. I'd love to hear people's voices.
Okay, so those of you guys probably didn't like being muted here. There's the way it's set up here in this webinar, but I'm going to go through whoever is actually online. I will just unmute you guys so you guys can talk, but feel free to use the Q&A. I think I have to promote them all to panelists, it sounds like, to allow them to talk, though.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Maybe, I don't know. So do you guys think I should do that? Do you want me to?
Can you do it quickly?
I have to go through each one, but I'll do it. Yeah, I'll just promote them to panelists, and that way
okay,
they can talk. Okay. So that's Beth. Okay. I think I did that. Let me see. Caitlin. Let's see. All right, so we'll have a lot of people on that. Hi guys, can you hear us? Sorry about putting you guys on mute. It's not that.
As you're making them panelists, will we all be able to see each other? And
I think so.
You have no saying, so people I want to know.
And if they don't want to see, they can make themselves.
Unless you put something over your camera.
Off their video if they want to.
Right.
Hi, I had a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I personally am in a situation, I'm non-tenure track, I'm at a STEM university where the writing practice for most of my colleagues is very different than mine would be. And I'm wondering, there's a bunch of people here who might be interested in this. Might there be interest in forming a remote writing group among people who are either here today or just through WLN?
Great idea.
I love that idea.
I say yes.
We could even, Catherine, we could even add a question to the survey that we're going to send out asking, saying if you're interested in joining a remote writing group, give us your email address.
That'd be great.
Okay, I will do that. Great idea.
Thank you.
So some of you have your mics muted. If you want to speak or ask a question, just make sure you unmute yourself.
Right, I've noticed that I couldn't unmute them, so.
Yeah, I think they have to unmute themselves.
Or maybe, let me see if I have to. I'm trying to unmute them, but maybe not. Okay.
So if you've got a question, just shout it out.
We're all here. Or a comment, something to add to mean, some of what we've presented today is like, so if you have anything to add, strategies that you use that are helpful.
Okay. Well, maybe we covered it all. It's possible that they felt that we had covered it well enough. But I guess, you know, maybe what we can tell you is if you don't have any questions right now, we do have our emails. We sent them out with our webinar, but we will keep, I guess we'll send it out when we send out the video of this presentation. And you can always contact us if you have questions. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Great. So
Have a nice Friday and have a good weekend ahead.
all right.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Night.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good night from Europe.
Yay, Europe.
Yeah.